Now it's live. Hey, everybody.
Technical difficulties there, but here's our intro because I know you guys love it so much. Welcome to the Rant Live. Hey.
Cool.
Hey, it worked. Hey, there we go.
Uh,
Look, man, we are just the production value of this show is just it's intense.
it never ceases to amaze. I'll say that. It's we are the Chicago Bears of live video and audio podcasting, because it might look like shit, but in the end, we get it figured out.
It all comes together so beautifully.
It's something.
Well, welcome everybody. So just to kind of catch everybody up on what's going on here. So we started the rant back on April 9th amidst the pandemic that we still find ourselves in, strangely enough. But we did it as a Cubs broadcast, a webcast, live webcast. We are still doing it as a live webcast, but we have now started a new website. Along with Cubs Insider, we have Bears Insider. And so as we go through kind of separating the brands and doing things there, we're going to be covering the Bears. So we're going to do two separate shows from now on. We're going to do one called the Rant Live Bears Edition, and then we'll do another one immediately following this and set up as a separate show as the Rant Live Cubs Edition. And so we're going to be talking both Bears and Cubs, for those of you who love Chicago. And look, that person, Yai?
Yeah, I don't know. I
didn't quite get that name. But
he's right, you are kiss ass though. So
yeah, true. So there you go. This is the Bears version. The Chicago Bears are 5-1 and in first place in the NFC North. And as much as no one could have predicted a pandemic in 2020, I don't think anyone could have predicted the Bears being in first place of the NFC North at this point in the season, or at all.
And I don't think anyone did. I don't even think most Bears fans did. Although, it was funny because I didn't think they'd be as bad as what a lot of people felt. Like there's a lot of people that thought they would just be awful. And I mean, they haven't looked good doing it, but last year, and I think that was anytime you get a team that's coming off kind of a disappointing season, I think the tendency is to look at 2018 was an aberration. 2019 is a regression to who they really are. Now they're unsettled. Who knows? Boy, they're going to suck in 2020. But, a lot of the defense was still intact. Guys are coming back healthier, especially Akeem Hicks, obviously last year. And I think that was a big part of it. Right. And now the offensive line still needs some work. Quarterback is still an issue. Play calling is a bigger issue, but they've got enough talent. And it's not as if they're in a really tough division. The Vikings are way, way down. Detroit's no good.
The Vikings are actually worse than I thought they were going to be.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the Vikings are way worse. It's a good thing they're paying Kirk Cousins all that money. That's working out really well for them.
Keep them straddled there.
Yeah, but no, I mean, am I surprised that I'm actually, and I know this sounds weird, I think I'm less surprised that they're 5-1 than that they're in first place. If that's because the Packers, outside of getting destroyed in Tampa and not looking good at all, they appear to be head and shoulders above. So I guess this is maybe temporary. I don't anticipate the Bears continuing at this pace, but they've already surprised me a few times, so who knows?
So something I've got an article that we're going to throw out there either later today or tomorrow about the Bears' path going forward, which at 5-1, obviously they're somewhat in control of their own destiny as much as you can be after 6 games, I suppose. But really, the next 3 games is going to be pivotal for the Bears. I mean, they've got the Rams coming up, in which they're an underdog, which I think they've been an underdog in not every game, but almost every game this season. And then they've got the Saints and then the Titans before playing the Vikings and then getting a bye. So you want to talk about those next 3 weeks that are just going to be huge. I mean, just depending on how they come out of it, is really going to, basically dictate what can happen, because the next games that they play, they're not really playing anybody the remainder of their season with a winning record outside of Green Bay. So if they can, come out of these next 3 games good, they could be set up really well to win the NFC North.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be interested to see how that stuff all unfolds. I do. All those teams concern me for various reasons, and I think there's reason to kind of fear that things come back to earth. At the same time, I think what was really telling, and all of these are different. That I think the Saints, Drew Brees, you got the Rams. They've got a relatively, although the Bears have played really, really well against the Rams the last couple seasons. And then, the Titans freak me out because they've got Travis Henry back there as this monster man running the ball. He's like 8 feet tall and 500 pounds.
He's like a giant,
like 3.5 40 or something. When you're that big, the closest thing, and Bo Jackson was a different type of, but he reminds me of that same type of where he's powerful enough to just throw guys out of the way and fast enough to break off 94 yards.
He's like one of those giants from Game of Thrones, we're just throwing players.
Yeah, it's just kind of it's sort of frightening. And that's one of the things that when you have a team like that can sort of balance things out. But I will say the one thing that I really took away, so they looked really good against Tampa. And that maybe not really good, but I mean, they got to Brady. They kept Brady off his game. And part of that was because, like, Brady's never had the strongest arm in the world. And now that he's like 58 years old, he's much more reliant upon that middle game. And the Bears have such a good pass rush with just their front four, right? They can drop all the time. I don't like it all the time to watch Khalil Mack drop back in coverage, but they can keep those linebackers there and clog up that middle of the field. And I think that messed with Brady a little bit because they rushed him and they didn't give him those openings in the middle of the field at kind of that short and middle distance that he likes. And I do kind of wonder if that's part of the reason why the Packers got in trouble against him, if they don't have that same push. If they're able to get the pressure, as elementary and generic as that sounds, if they're able to continue getting that pressure and not having to blitz and letting their linebackers kind of run around and roam free in the middle, I think that really helps them regardless of the teams they play against. And again, Drew Brees, older quarterback, not the same guy that we're used to from 5 years ago. And so, can they get after him? Can they get after Jared Goff? Absolutely. I don't know. We'll see. I'll be cautiously optimistic. I'll say that.
Yeah, I feel like when you mentioned the Saints and Drew Brees, I really, they're going to put some pressure on Drew Brees, and I think they're going to do everything very similar to what they did against Tampa and Brady, which is, just take away those short kind of out passes, those kind of get out of jail free passes, and then put the pressure on him. And I mean, he's not going to be able to move around very well. I feel good about the Saints game. The Rams have a good defense. It may be the best defense that the Bears have faced all year, which is kind of scary because, there's a lot of talk, obviously, about the Bears offense, about, Nagy's play calling, about whether Foles is good enough to, kind of turn the corner for the Bears and their offense. Allen Robinson had a press conference today, and during that press conference, he spoke about, really trying to get more exploding plays. He feels explosive plays. So if this offense can get more explosive plays, he feels like that's the key. Now, that's easier to say than to actually do, but it's going to be real difficult for the Bears to be able to do a lot against this Rams defense and get right versus trying to get right against a defense that's maybe not as good as the Rams. And so I'm a little concerned about that.
A little concerned about Aaron Donald just absolutely wrecking shop. Like that's what concerns me, is getting a dude. So you got a Bears offensive line that already, you got Rashad Coward in there at the one side, and that's obviously not something they would prefer to have. And Bobby Massey has not really proven himself to be great either. And so, I'm a little bit concerned about what happens on the edges. And when you have a defense, like, they haven't faced a dude like this yet, right? And so you've got that right side Leno, okay, can he get that done? But if I'm the Rams, I'm looking at that right side again with Coward and Massey at guard and tackle and going, I'm just going to absolutely just attack that side of it, and we're going to go after it. I don't care. And if the Bears, again, if maybe if their guys can't run, if Montgomery's only in there getting 2 yards, maybe he can chip one of these guys coming off the end. I don't know. But that part concerns me, because if they can collapse one entire side, that really limits your game plan a little bit. So again, this is a reason, though. That's where I'm much more, part of it's like Trubisky's legs can kind of get him out of it. But if you have a veteran quarterback who can stand there in the pocket, who can still make those reads despite that pocket collapsing on him a little bit, maybe Foles can show out and do a little bit of a better job in that than Trubisky would have. I don't know. That's my fingers are crossed on that one, but I'm a little bit frightened.
Yeah, this just doesn't feel like the game to break out explosive plays against this defense. It feels like the game where you want to kind of stick to the game plan they've had so far this season, which has worked.
Yeah, I mean, it's worked because the defense has put them in position. Although, part of me though, again, and what I don't know, and I'm not familiar enough with the way the Rams kind of cover everything all the way, so I don't want to talk out of turn. But it's the same thing I talked about with the Bears, though. If you can get real pressure with just those front four, if you don't need a blitz, if you can just do that and let the rest of your defense sit back, absolutely, it's going to be very difficult for the Bears to have any big strikes. They haven't done that at this point yet. So, again, I'm doubting we see that. Sometimes you will find that, though, where if a team's getting really aggressive defensively, that if they're bringing the corners up a little bit, if they're bringing a safety, sometimes that might leave the middle of the field open a little bit more, and you can break one of those plays, even if it's not designed to be like we saw if you watch the Monday night game with Arizona just dropping that bomb to Christian Kirk just 80 yards down the field. That's not who the Bears are. That's not what they're going to do. But I would like to see them get some stuff. Whether it's, Robinson's not necessarily the big play guy, but Mooney with that speed, I'd love to see one of those guys get into a position to where they're not just having to make a sideline catch and then they're going out of bounds with it, but where they can catch it with room to go, and really make some upfield plays. That would be nice to see. I mean, and sometimes I don't want to say that would override, what the play calls are, but there's this lack of confidence right now. Like nobody, I don't even know what the Bears believe that they've got that in them. So whether that's breaking off a big run, maybe they extend the defense somehow and Montgomery can get around the outside, or maybe Cordero Patterson breaks a return, or maybe he gets a funky little play. I don't know, whatever it is. I want to see them break that and just kind of, I feel like that'll help a little bit, like loosen things up. And maybe I'm just speaking for myself. Like I just want to see them break something off. So it's not like, all right, well now it's 2nd and 7. Well, now it's 3rd and 3. You know what I mean? And just really get it out there. So I don't know.
Just get a little time to relax during a Bears game. I always feel like I'm just right there on the edge of my seat.
That would be nice.
Like it's just, you're like a player or two from things going terribly wrong. So hopefully that does not happen. And I mean, speaking of the defense, they came out against Carolina and they just set the tone so early. That first drive, they just absolutely smothered Carolina. They got a sack, which looked like it was a safety, but they didn't give them the safety, which, in hindsight was a good thing, because then on the very next play, Teddy Bridgewater chucked an interception that led to a Bears touchdown, where Nick Foles connected with Cole Kmet, which was, everyone freaking out about Kmet not being involved in the offense at all, only being in on about 25% of the plays offensively, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But he looked pretty good, very tight window that they squeezed that pass into. So it's just the Bears defense coming out and establishing order very quickly. And I think that's something that other teams really have to spend a tremendous amount of time going forward on game planning when they play the Chicago Bears. And so it does give the offense a little bit more room to breathe, so to speak, if they can come out and just do kind of the basics well. But they've got to start running the ball, because if they don't start running the ball, it's just, I mean, you got Montgomery. What do you have, like 25 yards, 50 yards, 50 some yards against Carolina, which isn't awful, but there were definitely some times, was it late in the game on 3rd and 3 when you felt like they probably should have run the ball to run the clock out. And instead they threw the ball and it was an incomplete pass. Those times where the Bears really need to be able to execute a run, for 3 yards.
Yeah. I mean, if you can't count on your running game to get you 2 to 3 yards on a regular basis, like that should be a minimum that we should expect. Right. Or at the very least, even if, and I think we brought this up on a previous show, when they got beaten that Colts game, the one thing the Colts did well, they didn't run for a lot of yards. Their yards per carry were terrible. I think it was like 2.3 or 2.7 or something like that. But they committed to it and they kept running, because the one thing then that's going to do is cause a team to be a little bit more honest when it comes to the passing game. And, that's one thing I do feel like sometimes that whether it's Nagy or well, it is Nagy, but because he's calling the plays. But I feel like they either abandon it too early, or sometimes it feels like there's this weird balance where it's like, okay, you're kind of running in passing downs and passing in what should be running downs, and things get kind of mixed up a little bit. And there's just, again, is it personnel? Is it the play call? I don't know, but I don't like it. And I would really like to see them establish that run. As much as people made fun of Lovie Smith for talking about getting off the bus running, it was one of those things that's kind of a Bears hallmark. But more than that, and I'm not saying you need to do it to be like the Bears of old, but they need to do it because you got to be able to run for 2 or 3 yards on 3rd down and stop the clock, or not stop the clock, run the clock and stop the other team from getting the ball back. Because again, the defense had to step up when the offense couldn't convert on 3rd, and now they had to get that interception then to ice the game. I would much prefer they just go ahead and punch it through and then kneel on it and you're done.
God, that sounds so easy. It sounds so straightforward.
It's a no-brainer, right? Come on. Hand it off. Get a first down. Duh.
So the Bears, speaking of, looking forward, the Bears playoff odds, I found interesting ELO projections over at 538. And they talk about, what they do is they project out the remaining games of each team. And Bears have an 85% chance of making the playoffs, which I think is about the same percentage as a 5-1 team. So I thought about that. I'm like, well, I'm not sure what these projections are really telling us that we wouldn't be able to find out just from looking at how 5-1 teams perform in general. Except that they've got, I guess, more science and maybe some algorithms or whatnot behind them. But at the end of the day, you're feeling pretty good about, 85% odds to make the playoffs. Like I said, with the next 3 games being really a telltale sign. Now, if the Bears lose the next 3 games, then, I think we'll have to have a different conversation, unfortunately. But if they can at least win 1 or 2 of the next 3 games, their playoff odds are looking really good. And then they also projected them out at having 48% chance of winning the NFC North. So all in all, I think the Bears are in very, very good position at this point in the season, about as good as you possibly could have expected the Bears to be. And it's just a matter of do you think Matt Nagy would ever hand over offensive play calling?
I don't think he will this season, simply because, we're already far enough into it, and that maybe be a little bit weird. But that was one thing I was frustrated by last year when they made the wholesale changes on the offensive coaching staff. You change your OC, you change your tight ends coach, change your line coach. But the thing there is, if the guy calling the plays remains the same, then what did you really change? Because you can coordinate something all you want.
Which is at that point, it's just coaching, right?
Right. Well, if I go out, right, and so you say, you're like, man, my brakes in my car suck. I need to get them. So you worked on them yourself before, and then you hire me to work on them, and so I work on your brakes. But if you still go out there and drive like a maniac and stomp on, you're driving 90 miles an hour down the street and you're stomping on, you're still going to run your brakes out. Like your brakes are still going to, because you still drive like an idiot. I don't care who fixed your brakes. And so again, you can change out all these other coaches that you want. But, and that's the thing. It's like, we've talked about this. the offense doesn't lack imagination because you keep getting unimaginative offensive coordinators. They're just the plays that need to be called just aren't there. And it just feels kind of bland. I think that at a certain point, someone might have to get in his ear, although, Ryan Pace probably can't tell that the offense sucks because we've seen how he evaluates offensive talent. So I don't know that that's really something we need to look at. But, I do think that it would do. I talked about this before. I wrote about it the other day. And this is maybe weird and off the wall, but I just wonder if Nagy, for some reason, does not literally have the proper perspective of being on the sideline, the way he's seeing it unfold, where you normally see a coordinator, offensive or defensive. Pagano's kind of different. Pagano loves to be on the sidelines, be around his guys and fire them up. But a lot of those times you see those guys, they're up above, right? They're in the coach's box. They can see down the field. And if you've ever been to an NFL game, to me, I don't like being down low. I've been down there low before, but you can't really see a play unfold very well. And especially if you're toward one sideline or one end zone or the other, once the ball gets down the other field, it's really difficult to actually tell because your depth perception is weird. But if you're up above and you can watch how that stuff's unfolding, I just wonder if that's because you saw, and I think we talked about this last time too, but during that Tampa game, I believe, which was where Foles was like, kind of, I'm seeing this, and he was seeing things differently. And I just wonder if maybe Nagy comes to that realization, like, hey, you know what, dude, maybe somebody who's got a literally different view of this would be better off to provide some more feedback, but we'll see.
I mean, I think that makes perfect sense. I think most people would respond with that same comment that makes perfect sense. I think people have been questioning Matt Nagy for a long period of time, just in terms of his ability to be able to call an offensive game. And it just hasn't been, I've never felt like under Matt Nagy, the offense has clicked in any game.
Not outside of, maybe like it's every once in a while, even the worst teams, right, will kind of figure stuff out and things happen the right way. But yeah, it hasn't really felt like that. If the Bears had to go in a 2-minute, actually, I'd trust them more in the 2-minute drill, because I think that's a situation in which the coach can't be getting in the quarterback's way. That's when you kind of have to turn him over to him. Hey, no huddle, let's go.
Just sling it.
What you see. And the Bears looked like they were moving the ball fairly well in a couple of those situations when they did allow Foles to kind of go with it. And I think that's the reason you brought this guy in, is because he's been in the Philadelphia offense before, which is, again, similar with Doug Peterson. That's similar to what Nagy's running. It's the same Andy Reid coaching tree. So you brought in a guy who was familiar. The reason you did that was so that he could do this on the fly. He's been in this before. He's seen it before. So let the dude run the offense. And, unless that's what they're doing, and Nagy's being very protective of his quarterback, and it's a Foles thing, but I kind of doubt it, because I've seen Foles run an offense before, and it looks different from this.
Well, and it feels very similar to when Trubisky's in there. Yeah. There's the obvious differences of their skill set, but taking that away, the offense and the offensive production feels very similar. And so that's where you start to say, this is not a Foles thing. This is not a Trubisky thing, as much as perhaps it's just a play calling thing. And I think that's where we're kind of going with this, is to say, if it looks like a bear and it smells like a bear, it's a bear. You're going to get mauled. So.
Yeah, and the one thing, so I do want to point out too, like, I'm not happy with Nagy's play calling, but I do think he's a really good coach. Like, all the players seem to love the guy, like, and they want to play for him, and they want to win for this guy, and he seems like he's excited to be there, and it radiates this positivity. So, I think he's great as a head coach. That's the other problem that you see is so often. And that's not always even the case. A lot of times you get a really good head coach, defensive coach or offensive coach, be they a coordinator or a certain position group, and they get elevated to this role of head coach, and they don't know how to then delegate and manage. They know how to hey, if I'm the defensive coordinator and I can just sit here and that's all I got to do, I'm cool with that. I have a straightforward approach. But a lot of the times you see him, and I think the interesting thing with Nagy is a lot of these guys will fall back to what they know. And they'll coach that offense, or they'll coach that defense, and they won't do a very good job of being the leader over the whole team. I think Nagy's done a really good job of doing that, of managing the team, but I believe it's at the risk of it's almost as if he's being a little too conservative whether that's because he doesn't want to devote all the time over there, or for whatever reason that might be. And that's where I think it would be a really good idea to bring in that OC that you're comfortable turning the reins over to. And then again, you can have a little bit more of your duties a little more clearly defined.
Yeah. And I mean, there was a report earlier this week on ESPN about Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace getting at least another year, which implied that wasn't a guarantee coming into the season, which I kind of find that to be odd. I mean, I get that the Bears haven't had a lot of playoff success lately, and things like that, but I just think that, to me, I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace. I mean, to me, I'd question Ryan Pace more than I'd question Matt Nagy. To your point about Matt Nagy being clearly a good leader, clearly somebody who can at least delegate, where he's not strong. But Ryan Pace has, to me, made a lot more questionable decisions, particularly on trying to identify offensive talent, than I think Matt Nagy has. I mean, you'll never be able to get past Mitch Trubisky at the second overall pick, and Deshaun Watson and the other quarterbacks that he passed over. Yeah, Mahomes that he passed over. So it's, to me, I think it's a little. I don't really see where people ever come off questioning Matt Nagy. I think he, as the coach of the Bears, is the right guy. And, I think he's the right guy for, until you see that there's been, more than just 3 years where he just clearly can't get past. I mean, everybody's got to have it's his first head coaching position. Everybody's going to have a learning curve there. But I think all things considered, I think he's doing a really good job. So.
Yeah, I mean, to me, there's a couple different things there, though. And that's the one thing is that you typically see a GM and a coach tied fairly closely because let's say you want to get rid of the GM. Well, it's difficult to get the guy you really want, to bring in a top flight GM if that guy doesn't get to pick his own coach. Now, if he believes, as you just said there, if he really believes in Matt Nagy the same way, it says, yeah, this is the guy I would want regardless, and we're good to go. But that's a lot of times what you see is these teams have to kind of fall back to their, because again, a GM is going to want to come in there and he's going to want his guy. Now, could I see a situation in which Ryan Pace is relieved of his duties, which, again, I would not be against in any way, but the new guy comes and says, hey, love Nagy, kind of like what I've been saying, love Nagy. I think he's a great head coach, but you got to, I'll do this. I'll come in here and I'll help you run this team and I'll pick these guys for you, but something's got to change with the play calling. Something's got to be different there from what it is. And can those guys put those egos aside and do that? So I think that's kind of the Bears are in that weird scenario here where I think after last year, the fact these guys got one more year was one thing because last year was really disappointing. If things continue to go really well this year, it's difficult to part with anybody. But again, it would feel to me almost like it's been done in spite of what Pace has brought in. I look at the Jimmy Graham thing. Graham's been really good. We talked about this before, but at that cost, I mean, could you have gotten somebody else in there? Is that at the expense of Kmet? Are there things that they're actually setting themselves back because of the money that I'm just salty over it because I hated the signing at the time, but he has played really well and he's done exactly what they needed. He's been a big red zone target and that's been great. So we'll see.
Yes. Well, I mean, it's especially where the trade deadline's coming up on November 3rd. And so if the Bears
election day, baby,
it's like that was back in 2016 when the Cubs won. They won on the 3rd, I think it was, right? Right around election time. God, so hopefully something good once again will happen on that day this year. But it really feels like, I know there's the Eagles just cut one of their offensive linemen. Jamin Brown, I think his name was. And I mean, I watched a little video on him, and the guy was just getting beat so badly. It was terrible.
This is like Orlando Pace. They could go bring Orlando Pace back in.
And the Bills have likewise cut Quentin Spain, and I think there's a lot more upside to Spain. At least that's what it looks like. You don't know the story behind the closed doors, but you definitely want to see the Bears bring on an offensive lineman. I mean, it almost seems like it'd be a must-have if they're really going to make a serious playoff run. What do you think the chances are of the Bears actually going out and trading for an offensive lineman versus just trying to bring somebody else in?
I mean, a trade seems kind of unlikely, at least for anybody who's legit. I mean, they've clearly been, I don't want to say clearly been burned. Obviously the Khalil Mack trade, which I still can't believe actually happened. That was pretty cool. But they're going to need that draft capital at some point, and they're going to need those picks to rebuild some things. Although we could also argue that maybe they don't, because Pace isn't going to draft the right guys anyway.
Exactly.
So maybe go ahead and trade them away.
Picking offensive guys, then I think we're good.
Yeah, but I mean, they're going to, one way or the other, they're going to have to bolster that offensive line. I mean, it's just not.
Make a run.
Right. If they're cool, hey, we'll just see what happens, then they're fine. But if they are legit about like, hey, we didn't think we were going to be in this position, but now that we are, we got to push for it. I don't think they get there with the line that they've got right now. No. Not when you start facing the teams that can really get after the quarterback, and that really, again, that's just the kind of thing. Foles is not mobile enough to get away from that, and Trubisky I wouldn't trust to throw under pressure. So, go ahead and bolster the right side here if they plan to. But if they do it in a trade, I think you're looking at, again, some dude, not going to be like a difference maker. I think it'll be a gap filler type of a guy who can at least handle that side more capably than what they've got right now.
Yeah, I mean, it'd have to be from a team that's, kind of a bottom dweller type team. And I'm not familiar enough with the offensive linemen on those types of teams. I mean, certainly you're not looking at somebody like Cincinnati, for example, who just drafted Joe Burrow. They're not looking to lose any offensive linemen.
Right.
I think they actually have the same need. So, a lot of people are talking about the Bears when they go into the draft this year looking for a quarterback. I would much rather see them go for an offensive lineman, assuming that you can get one. And usually in the first couple, 2-3 rounds, you can really fill out a good offensive lineman. I believe James Daniel was taken in the second round from Iowa. And so losing him this season is just the worst thing that possibly could have happened to the Bears. So we'll see how they recover from that as they go forward. So that's it, folks, for us today on the Rant Live Chicago Bears edition. We will be coming right back at you here in just a few minutes with the Chicago Cubs edition of the Rant Live. So please be sure to check that out. Check us out on bearsinsider.com, and go Bears. See you later.
Bye.
Bye. We think maybe if we can work this out. There we go. Maybe just leave the studio real quick.
All right.